Hello, and welcome once again. You're listening to the voice of Free Arcadia. We are back after a bit of a break. We had some big things happen in the Leijiverse, the passing of Leiji Matsumoto since the last episode was recorded. Kind of appropriate, it was episode 9, a very symbolic of sort of death, and moving on to 10, a new cycle. And this might be a bit of a season 2 of the Free Arcadia podcast, so I'm excited about that. And I'm also super excited about the content we're going to talk about, Interstella 5555, but no, it's actually Interstella 45 if you're a Matsumoto fan, and you'll probably yell at me about that later on. I'm going to get corrected a lot, I'm sure, on a lot of things, because we got pure expertise on the panel today. Vintage Weeb, an incredible friend I've just met through Discords, actually, and just talking about anime and watching anime together, and this guy knows his stuff. So, Vintage, how are you? And could you introduce yourself a bit?
I'm doing fine. I'm Vintage Weeb. I'm at Vintage Weeb 8, and I love anime. I've probably been an anime fan for about, 26 years now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've seen the good times and the bad times. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're putting in those double digits, those multiple decades of anime fandom here.
That's crazy.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm kind of in the same boat. So, again, glad to have you on, Vintage. Vintage, I think we may have you on again in the future, too. So I don't want to jinx it.
It's up to everyone if I suck.
Vote in the comments. Vote in the chat right now. And we are recording live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Captain Harlock. Hey, I'm Captain Harlock. I kind of didn't introduce myself, but do I need introduced? Anyways, let's move on to a better introduction. Wub, the Daft Punk historian. When I Googled Daft Punk blog, it was you, man. It was you. So how are you, Wub? Can you introduce yourself to Leijiverse? I know there are a lot of your fans in the chat tonight.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Wub. I'm also known as the Daft Punk historian. That is my website. It's a little hard to explain what I do. I pretty much do everything. I try and make like history videos. I archive media online. I run a Twitter page where I just share as much about Daft Punk as I can. The short of it, I guess, is I just try to make as much information about Daft Punk as easily accessible to the public for free.
Daft Punk doesn't even really have a Twitter presence, so you're kind of filling a hole for them in their marketing, and I'm sure to an extent they appreciate that.
I would hope so. But
yeah, I kind of get the same feeling with Leiji Matsumoto sometimes, but we'll leave that right there. We'll move into the topic of the day, and that's Interstella 45. What a fantastic anime film that does something that is definitely not super prevalent in anime, the syncing of music to the animation, which is somewhat ironic given that anime really is inspired originally by Disney, who the musical animation companies. Vintage, what do you know about this? Can you help us here?
Well, I mean, of course, anime has a huge history about music. And it would take forever to explain it, but everyone knows that anime is derived from Disney and Disney's works. A lot of the Leiji Matsumoto, Tezuka, Ishinomori, they love Disney. They absolutely adore Disney. That is the fundamental thing that they studied when they were doing their mangas, when they were doing their feature-length films, when they were doing the anime TV series Astro Boy. They would study Disney religiously.
Yeah, the three of them would do it together, right? They were getting together. They were having film parties. At one point, they were basically buying and displaying so much film that the police in their area thought that they were running an underground, black market cinema. And Tezuka had enough notoriety at the time to be able to say, hello, officers. He just kind of smoothed it over. It's just some friends. We're just building the inspiration for the children who will work in the miracle economy. Just chill for a second, bro.
When we talk about anime syncing with pop music or music, I think there's a 1 year in particular that kind of changed the spectrum of anime. In Japan, in 1982, a sci-fi anime came on air. It was called Super Dimension Fortress Macross. And it was a traditional space opera, but with one twist. It introduced the idol singer with pop music and with bubblegum pop, and the girls singing the love songs with Lin Min-mei. Huge game changer for the animation industry, because it's usually music that tells the story, like Yamato. It's telling you what the show is about.
You bring up Leiji Matsumoto right there, and Leiji Matsumoto's music definitely selling well on vinyl. They were making vinyl of his stuff. They were making vinyl for Emeraldus, which only ever at that point was a manga. Matsumoto had a very deep connection with music, and Matsumoto has a deep connection with Macross as well.
Definitely, because Macross is a parody of Yamato. The very first episode is just a one-for-one recreation of the first episode of Yamato. And the other thing that happened in 1982 was the advent of the AMV, anime music video. That, strangely enough, this is totally true. The first AMV was Space Battleship Yamato with all the violent scenes, because in America it was done as Star Blazers, and Star Blazers was heavily censored. So what this guy did, he took the Japanese tapes of all the violence from Space Battleship Yamato that were edited out, and he edited a clip of all the violent scenes in Yamato, and he overlaid it with the Beatles song, "All You Need Is Love." A sensation. That he premiered it at Otakon, and everyone loved it. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I think you can find it online right now, but I think the music has been stripped out because, of course, it has. But the history of anime and music is just so comprehensive. It's very dense. It's a lot of dense.
And you brought up Daikon as well. So there's animation and music, which I wasn't even thinking of. I've been racking my brain for 2 days. I'm like, of course, what is it? It's just Daikon 4. It's just called the event title, right?
Yeah, Daikon 4, the open animation. It was their, I think they were the final one, and they overlaid it with Twilight from ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. And that was a huge hit for the fans of anime video. I think that was made in 1985, 84 or something like that. But that's an incredible fan-made. That is getting a re-release, I think, sometime soon. I think they found the original elements for that.
That's a whole other can of worms and especially with copyright law. And poor Wub has no idea what we're doing. So maybe we should... let's move on. Okay, we still got to get to 2001 here. So how do we get to 2001?
Anime got really popular in France and in the West, and this was a good time for Wub to say what Daft Punk watched.
Yeah. When is Daft Punk formed? And I know they had a band before Daft Punk too that explains things.
So they were born in the mid-70s. In the early 80s, I believe it was.
Yes. Yeah.
Captain Space Harlock was...
Whoa. I have to protect you from the fans right now. Okay. Space Pirate...
Yes, I know a different name.
Well, you got even the original name wrong, so we're going to have to go from scratch here. It's all good, though. We're going to teach you everything about the Leijiverse, more than you ever wanted to know. Space Pirate Captain Harlock, and it was known as Albator in France because Harlock was too close to Haddock, another popular captain from Tintin, I believe, correct?
Tintin.
Okay.
So, yes, that was being shown in France, I believe in the early 80s. And also Galaxy Express 39, they were just kids watching this in France, and apparently it had a huge impact on them. They grew up together, they met in grade school, they were each 12. And they were like, oh, you like the same music as I do. Oh, you watched Leiji Matsumoto when you were a kid, so did I. This whole Leijiverse, I'm sure, was implanted into them at a young age. And in 1992, they formed a band, an indie band called Darlin. And it was a trio, it was 3 of them. And they put out a record, and a British journalist called them Daft Punky Thrash. And long story short, they end up ditching the whole indie rock thing, and they start getting into electronic music, and they chose Daft Punk as the name for their band, which is, I think, a really fun origin story for the name. Signed to this label called Soma Records. 1994, their first release is called The New Wave. It does all right. 1995, they put out a single called Defunct. And this is where all of the hype starts happening. People are like, oh, you know about these Daft Punk guys? They made this crazy track, Defunct. It's slower than all of the other tracks. It's more groovy and funky and all this stuff. And it just starts to blow up for them. In 1996, they finished their debut album. They signed to a major record label, Virgin Records. And in 1997, the album is released. They go on tour in 1997, pretty much the entire world, Europe, America, even Japan. Then that brings us to 1998/1999, when they start work on Discovery. Discovery is what leads into Interstella. And I don't know if you want me to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting you say they're signed to Virgin, but when does Virgin become Columbia Virgin or Virgin Columbia?
Daft Punk have no involvement with Columbia Records until 2013. So I know in your notes you write...
Yeah. Don't expose my notes. My bad notes. No.
but no, there was no connection with Columbia until 2013. So
okay, that is interesting because Columbia released a lot of Leiji Matsumoto vinyl, maybe just a bit more star-crossed interest there. They do find a way, get a conversation with Toei. So do you know anything about that or the routes they take to, they made this album, maybe they even just start with the concept of that. Where does that come from?
Their idea was to do a live action film, and it had something to do with like robots. They were like these robot protagonists. I guess it was too ambitious. They had bit off more than they can chew with that. Maybe it was going to cost too much money. I don't know exactly what the reason was, but they ditched the live action idea. And they were like, okay, let's do anime, because they've always loved anime.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's so crazy they go from live action and then they're like, oh, you know what would be easier? Anime. Anime would be way easier. Yeah. I mean...
I'm not sure if they thought it'd be easier, but somehow they switched from the live action idea to the anime.
Path of least resistance, I guess. That's amazing. So they have this anime idea and then they just... talk to Virgin and it works out, or?
Yeah. Their record label, Virgin Records, is owned by EMI. Toshiba EMI have a connection with Toei Animation. And so Daft Punk bring their anime idea to Toshiba EMI in Japan.
I'm sorry, Toshiba, you're naming things. Toshiba, it's interesting because Toshiba had a Japanese mascot called Lightspeed Esper, who also got a takusatsu. I don't know if you know what those are, like Power Rangers and stuff. But Leiji Matsumoto took over a manga for Lightspeed Esper, and it was kind of his coming into his own style because Tezuka was really inspiring the original mascot. That Astro Boy look was the mascot. And then Matsumoto makes it this long, gangly thing like you see in Interstella 545. Yeah. So very interesting. Another star-crossed thing. I got to throw it in.
So eventually they get in a room with Leiji Matsumoto and they say, hey, this is our idea. Leiji Matsumoto apparently has a lot of love for French and European culture. Mm-hmm. And so he sees this idea and he's like, I love it. Let's do it. This all happened mid-2000, like July, August-ish.
Let's actually back up then, because we want to talk about 9999. Maybe I'll talk about the notes again. Here, you were quick to note, you were kind of pushing it away, but no, I have to bring it to light. The Discovery album, the production process experiences this huge catastrophe on September 9th, 1999, when they lose a bit of their recordings. Can you tell us about that?
The story goes that on September 9th, 1999, so 9/9/1999, Daft Punk are in their studio. The 999 bug happens. Kind of similar to like the Millennium Bug
Y2K?
sampler. Yeah, Y2K. It's similar to that, but it's 9999, so they're working on music and their sampler explodes. Part of the story is part of the album was lost, I guess. But the main appeal of the story is that through this explosion, they had to have a surgery and they became part machine. That's why going into Discovery, you see Daft Punk no longer as humans as they were in the 90s. They are now robots.
So that's fantastic and literally fantastic, right? This is kayfabe. This is love for Leiji Matsumoto, who we know in Leijiverseville, Submarine Super 99, Galaxy Express 39, as Wub just stated. And then also you could throw in there Fire Force DNA Sites 999.9. So, or 39.9, however you say that. Lots of nines in the Leijiverse, and you can see that maybe this, I mean, when do they tell this story? Do you know the first time they tell this story?
I was thinking about this because in the notes you're talking about all these references, and I'm like, there's no way that Daft Punk were thinking about these references when they were thinking about the whole robot idea. But they weren't talking about the robots having the explosion and all that in 9999. They weren't talking about that until November of 2000, after they had started production on Interstella and their meetings with Leiji. So I think that through their meetings with Leiji and the whole concept of the robots happening in this same time, they might have been like, okay, nines are important.
So have you ever watched Galaxy Express 39?
Nope.
Highly recommend the first movie. The first movie, I think, is a must watch, because I think you'd feel what Daft Punk felt. Maybe. When and their love for Leiji Matsumoto. It is my go-to. I have a literal list of an enjoyability order for the entire Leijiverse section of anime, and I say Galaxy Express 39, the movie, is tops. It's got a fantastic director, and it's Toei Animation, so same company. It was really a landmark film for them. And the themes of Galaxy Express 39 deal specifically with robotic mechanization, they call it there. They are the machine men, that people are becoming machine men. They are giving up their lives to become machine men in order to live forever, to get beyond this. But it's all, kind of a capitalistic ruse.
The Daft Punk fans, we think of like the 999 bug, and in one interview they say it happened at 909, the explosion. We thought it was like a reference to like the drum machine, the TR-909.
Yes.
The more I'm looking at your notes and all of this stuff about the anime and the importance of nines, I think it's more of a reference to that. Crazy to learn.
I'm so glad. And another thing you said about Toshiba, and now I'm thinking maybe that job with Lightspeed Esper gets Matsumoto in the door with Toei if their relationship goes back to the 70s. So you might have just unlocked some doors in my head as well. This is one of our best episodes yet, I think. And I think you are on point with the 909 as well. So they're interlacing references. And what you'll learn as we start to talk about names and things like that and concepts, they're layered. We're going at least 3 layers deep on every single reference in the Leijiverse, and that's kind of how he structures his story. If it doesn't intersect in at least 3 ways, I don't think he'd keep it in the story, anything. And we could even talk more about Matsumoto's connection to France, because that's really fascinating, because his father was trained by French pilots. Now, this later doesn't work out so well for the French because they're fighting the Japanese in World War II, and Matsumoto's father, of course, we know, was over the Yamato as it exploded, which signifies really one of the major turning points of World War II, that it's going to come to an end.
A battleship?
It was a giant battleship. It was one of the biggest battleships ever created in World War II.
Okay.
And it was a huge disaster for
Yeah, they put everything into the Yamato.
Is the anime about a space version?
Yes, they revitalized the Yamato as a last-ditch effort to go into the stars and save humanity. And along the way, maybe nail an alien chick. I don't know. We'll see. But it's got a Star Trek thing. It's like that. So
yeah, you guys are going to have your work cut out explaining these anime references.
Well, I mean, Toei itself, Toei, the animation company that did this, just celebrated their 75th year of active production of animation. So anime is a very, very, very dense subject matter.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it as fast as possible.
Matsumoto's connection to Europe gives him a severe connection to that kind of Anglo-Saxon, Franco-German media legacy, the stories, the literature therein, that matter is around his house. He's probably in the, if you think about Japan, Web, it's a somewhat isolated culture. It's a island culture. Matsumoto as a child is probably in the 99.9th percentile of Japanese children who are interacting with foreign media at that time at that sort of level. So his connection to France and that kind of storytelling, which does seep into the Interstella 4 or 5 characters and things like that, he puts the classical opera in space opera. If you're familiar with space opera, it had more of a superhero-y vibe before Matsumoto comes, and he's just like, nope, I'm putting Wagner in it. It's got this epic operatic feel to it that's been amplified and made literal. It's his own sort of layering and making the metaphor. And what he does to anime in a lot of ways is introduce that storytelling method and those themes and ideas to an extremely wide audience, not just in Japan, obviously, but it connects in France and Italy for I think, those reasons. One quick note, I'll humble brag, actually, from our episode about Maytel, where I speculated, Maytel is based on Mater, and Mater is Latin for mother. It got Romanized incorrectly to Maytel. And I speculated one time, I think Matsumoto just kept it because it sounded French. And I had 2 Frenchmen on my podcast and they went, it just sounds really French. You guys are French, so I'm asking, to me, it sounds like this is a more elegant sort of L, right? Sound to it. Do you think I'm way off base here? You guys would be the ones I have to ask. Well, I recently read an interview where Matsumoto said, well, it sounded French, so we kept it. So count one for me. I gotta brag there and correct the record. Love you, Julian. Love you, Ito. Please come back on the show. So Matsumoto has a strong connection to France.
Like I said, sometime mid 2000, they meet, and production doesn't begin until October of 2000. According to the DVD, it has the production details on it. I don't know if this was the original intention, but when they were first promoting Discovery and they're like, oh, we did this video with Leiji Matsumoto, they're talking about only the One More Time video, because the One More Time video was the first to get released, and it was apparently released in March of 2001 with the album. They were just saying, oh, we did this video. They're just talking about the One More Time video. And they're saying, oh, there might be more videos coming soon. As it would turn out, they started releasing the subsequent videos for Aerodynamic, Digital Love, and Harder, Brighter, Faster, Stronger throughout early 2001 through mid 2001. And then after that, the videos stopped kind of showing up like that. And it was just finally released in 2003.
Vintage, you had some memories of that time, right? Of the 2001 release there.
When it came out, I went to when we had CD stores and DVD stores. There's a huge poster for the release for Daft Punk, and I did not know what it was. It was a huge guitar. It looked incredible, and it was great. I was like, oh my goodness. A week after it released, I did not know who Daft Punk was. I never listened to their music, but I was watching, I think it was Toonami, and there was a music video of these blue people singing and dancing. This is amazing. Is this like a music video? Is this a new movie coming out? I was fascinated, and it was a DVD. It was one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time, and I was like, oh my goodness, is this the guy who did Galaxy Express 39 and Harlock? I watched Galaxy Express 39 on Saturday Anime on Sci-Fi Network in the early 90s. And that movie wrecked me. I mean, I love that movie. That movie, every time I watch that movie, I burst into silent tears. I don't cry. I mean, I don't weep. I just like tears comes out of my eyes. I love that movie so much.
Yeah.
That's because I'm so mad that they made a sequel, but that's not here and there.
I'm that kind of guy. I like a do. So, you've gotten 2 glowing reviews just now, but please watch, and you have to report back after you watch it too, what you thought.
Yeah.
And if you felt the feels, if you maybe shed a tear, if you cried, you have to let us know.
No, here's the thing with anime. I mean, I thought Galaxy Express 39 was my first exposure to Leiji Matsumoto. And that seems to me not true. I lived in Italy when I was a little boy. My dad was stationed in Italy. Italian TV shows a lot of Japanese animation, and I did not know what I was watching. I thought I was watching Italian animation. There was a Fist of the North Star, Saint Seiya, and a show called Star Zinger. And Starzinger was so cool. It was so, and I was like, what is that? And 10, 15 years later, I was like, that's Leiji Matsumoto. I remember his shows in Italy, and now he's doing it when I'm coming back to America. He's everywhere. He's following, he's shadowing, he's stalking me, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that's a really cool experience to have as a kid and get so much Matsumoto exposure. I am violently jealous of that as a child because I had to wait till I was like almost 30 to get Matsumoto in my life. But we're here now. I was 30. I'm lying. So here we go. And I think this happens like just after, in the context of Matsumoto, I'll get everybody there. Cosmo Warrior Zero releases on PlayStation. You don't know what that is, but we're just going to blaze through it. And so that's actually kind of a new spark too for Matsumoto. Cosmo Warrior Zero isn't a smash hit for PlayStation, but it's enough of a hit to warrant an anime, and they make some more anime after that. So, and it's not a high quality thing, but it's a budget production. It's kind of grinding through, and it's keeping Matsumoto in the public consciousness, at least in Japan. So it does work out that Matsumoto, just a year later, is having his international splash. His involvement in the production, beyond this kind of vague visual supervisor sort of role, he provides a bunch of character designs, right? With the Greco-Roman sort of look on a couple of them, and Earl has this more of a jumpsuit going on. And yeah, so these are kind of cool themes, and it seems like he wants to integrate that Greco-Roman thing. He wants to actually do Greek, which I don't see in a lot of Matsumoto's stuff. So maybe he's not able to get that through as much, because I think there's some other inspirations for the group that we will get into.
The entire Interstella 4-5 movie is finished in April 2003. And it premiered in May 2003 at the Cannes Film Festival. It cost over $3 million of Daft Punk's own money to produce because the labels are not going to put up that much money to make an anime film for their artists.
One of the first artists to point this out in the public consciousness is Kanye West for his Jesus Walks video. He's very public about, I am spending every dime on this. And he would later go on to make, to sample Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. So quick point there. Maybe you were going to say it, but.
So I just think it's worth pointing out, because had the label been involved with the making of the film, they probably would have tried to put in their own input on how they want the story to go and whatnot. And Daft Punk have always been about, they are in control of everything. And so if they need to put up $3 million to make this movie the way they want to make it, they're going to do it. And also another kind of crazy thing, Thomas of Daft Punk was flying to Japan every month to go check in on the project and see how everything was going.
The dailies, as we call it.
Control freaks. They want to make sure, they just want to make sure everything is going as they want it to go.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting that he pointed out Daft Punk's got to have complete creative control. I mean, this is one-to-one with how Matsumoto is. We talk about Yamato real quick there, and I think we should also go back and say he was hired on by Yoshinobu Nishizaki, who I'm not going to get into it right now, but he wasn't the creative force, but he had the original story. And Matsumoto reformats the story to his taste and his sensibilities and the storytelling that he learned from. He learned all this deep classical storytelling from these. I'm not talking about French and European stuff from like the 1900s. No, he was going back. He was going to the Renaissance. He was going to that place as a kid, listening to Wagner, thinking about it, and drawing his own maybe sci fantasy manga there. And when he came to Nishizaki, he almost didn't take the job because he knew he couldn't have complete creative control, but he does anyways because of fate. His father being above the Yamato as it explodes, and he received the classified blueprints for the Yamato by his neighbor at one point as after he moved to Tokyo. So he was a bit star-crossed. He had to do that, but he loves that. He needs that creative control, and so these are two. I don't know how that worked out. These are two sets of control freaks. Maybe they were just in sync. Maybe it was just perfectly magical. We don't know the nitty gritty, but it's interesting that it all seems so star-crossed that they're all working together.
All of Leiji Matsumoto's stuff is in Japanese. So I've read and understood very few of the things he said about the project, but from what I hear, he describes it like star-crossed. Like, yeah, like it was just the perfect timing for these two robots to come into my life and do this project.
Well, maybe that's a good transition into the story.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, because that's good, because it opens with that interview we're discussing. We see Matsumoto, and he's sitting between the robots, and he's talking about, musicians or magicians, and I see it like a stream of light in my head, and we go into the life stream. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII, there, it's a bit of a white light life stream, and all of a sudden we're seeing the outline of the guitar shape and this symbology that's going to be established here. Even in a space/rock opera, we've got to have the symbology there. We've got to have the mark that has the meaning. We're hearing a band playing on an alien world. Quickly, this alien world kind of reminds me of Garmalos a little bit. We've got these organic, spiring buildings. And when we finally do cut to the band, they've got blue skin, which also represents the Garmalos there, which ends up being a weird reveal in the original Yamato. And so we see this band. They're the most popular band, and they're possibly inspired by the Bugaloos. Do you know anything about the Bugaloos, Wub?
I do not.
I'll put this up here. It's a Sid and Marty Krofft joint, from what I understand. We can just cut right into the members of the group. And right off the top, we have Stella, the almost sort of the namesake of the movie. Stella has this reversed heart-shaped sort of cutaway design element in her dress, and I spent all day trying to figure out what that was called. It's been given a name. I read an article on it, but this is a motif, right? This is a very feminine motif about kind of feminine power, I think. That's what it's kind of representing there. They have that feminine strength, and she does have kind of a bit of a Smurfette vibe to her. She's got the only blue female for most of the movie. She's the female central piece. She's not the Smurfette of this world, obviously. We do see some other women, but she is lauded. She is elevated above, and she's even kind of elevated above the band just by, she's playing the bass. She's got sort of a Gwen Stefani vibe. Got Arpeggius, who's got a bit of, maybe a little bit of Captain Harlock hair going on, this kind of smooth, pointy thing. But he also kind of ends up feeling redundant at some point, but he is kind of the band leader. At least at the very beginning, he does the most leaderish type of stuff, most action there.
My impression is that he kind of seems like the leader. Stella, I have to agree with you. She seems like this kind of lauded after figure, as we see from Shep's point of view later. He kind of like oogles about her, Yeah, we have Octave. I don't know how to pronounce some of their names.
I think it's just Octave. We'll go straight with the musical terms here.
Okay.
Yeah, and essentially ends up being... It's interesting sort of race commentary, maybe, or at least saying it's a commentary. It almost seems like he's a black guy. He ends up being made into a black guy, and he's a blue face. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to matter. And that's the kind of the message I get. It's like he gets his own strong roles in it later, and he gets his own action, and he's a great character too. But yeah, what were you going to say about Octave?
Yeah, it's very strange because he's like an alien race. But he's clearly like modeled after like a black man. Later on, we see it. It's odd that this random alien is so like black coded. But like you said, it doesn't really mean anything in the end.
That's what humans will see. They'll label you what they want to label you, but you can only label yourself, I think.
Well, that's schemas too, right? Like we only have so much reference for what we see. So, and breaking out of that reference is probably important too, to a degree.
I just had a thought. I think part of the reason why he's like so black coded is because the singer, Romanthony, who sings on One More Time, is a black man.
Okay.
So, nice.
I think that might be part of the reason why, even as an alien, he is so black-coded.
We have the drummer, the backbeat, Beryl, who I can mostly speak on as the Totoro analog. I think he gets some of the most loving references to the Leijiverse that we'll get, and he's a fun little character. He keeps things light and humorous, even when they're sad.
When you say he's like the analog, I don't know exactly what you mean, because I've looked up, like, Galaxy Express 39, and I see these characters, and they look just like Stella, and they look just like Beryl, and I'm like, why do these people all look the same?
We're going to get to it.
Maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, we are going to get to it because it ties in. You know what? Let's talk about something that we might have skipped. Let's talk about the title.
Oh, comic relief.
Comic relief. Totoro is definitely a comic relief, and his character archetype in the Leijiverse serves as that. You had a note on the title, Interstella 5555.
Oh,
the story of the secret star system, correct?
A lot of people, I think even Daft Punk fans might not know this, but it's a double entendre. Daft Punk in the 90s were talking about how they don't want to become like part of the star system. And the way they describe it, it's like this, I guess, oppressive structure that the music industry has, where like the personal lives and the faces of people that make music are just plastered everywhere around the world, and they lose all the privacy. I only know it as a double entendre: the music star system, and then just the star system in outer space. Apparently, it's a triple entendre.
So, Osamu Tezuka, as we were talking about, kind of the godfather of anime, has manga, and he as well repeats these character designs. Now, he's very brutal about how he does it. He calls it a star system, though, and it's very much like the musical star system that you referred to, but he has these characters, and they're stars. They are those same kind of stars, and he repeats them throughout his manga. Now, we're going to tie it back to Leiji Matsumoto. Tezuka uses this as really a production tool, okay? He doesn't have the time. He's making, a lot of people don't understand how much manga, how many comics were being made by people like Tezuka Matsumoto and Ishinomori. It wasn't the same as it is today where, you know, you're in Japan and there are just a ton of mangaka. These guys were kind of like part of a relatively small scene in Tokyo. So he ends up using the star system. Matsumoto sees that and he goes, I should do that too. And especially because he had just wildly changed his style, which was originally more like Tezuka, more like Astro Boy, and it turned into what we see in Interstella 4-5. And in his star system, though, it's called Toki no Wa, the Ring of Time. And it has an ancestral implication. Instead of being the same person like Tom Cruise in a bunch of different movies, we are actually seeing through space, time, interdimensional, space, literally interdimensional space, as we'll see in Interstella 4-5, there are these DNA, this ancestral DNA that links us all throughout time and repeats. And it's the story that goes on and on throughout time with these infinite variations, kind of like music. He's just using these notes in different organizations to tell different stories in different contexts. And the way he makes it work, again, is with these sort of triple entendres. So they were inspired by the star system of Tezuka through Leiji Matsumoto's work because these guys, who is in Daft Punk again? Did we even say their names?
Thomas Bangalter and Guy-Manuel de Homem Cristo. Thomas and Guy-Man for short. And
then they kind of have a third Daft Punk member. Who's that guy?
A little more obscure, but there's this guy called Cedric Hervé. He is the creative director. I do consider him the third member of Daft Punk because literally from, I believe, 1995, he had his hand was in there in the mix with all of the visual stuff that was happening, helping oversee it and had ideas, and those ideas turn into realities.
So more than likely, Cedric is doing this studious work and helping to discover the history of Leiji Matsumoto. He probably had context for Matsumoto himself. I mean, I can only imagine how wonderful it is to discover the history of anime with with access to Leiji Matsumoto, maybe on the phone or something. So that would be amazing. I think we know about the band, we know who they are, and we understand the connection of the star system. So Totoro, I will say, is part of that legacy. He's a large part of that legacy. And Captain Harlock, he is the best friend of Captain Harlock. And he creates the spaceship on which they go. And here's my little Harlock plushie, Totoro plushie. So
Leiji Matsumoto puts himself into the story sometimes. Is that true?
He has a lot of cameos, and in fact, so he is Totoro in a lot of ways. He is the short, bad teeth, bad eyes, I mean, all the flaws you would see in Totoro, and you don't see them so much in Beryl, because Beryl's kind of a younger, but he is short and a little deformed, and we call them potato men in the Leijiverse. I think that's because they have that potato-shaped head that's kind of like, I don't know. So yeah, they are their own type of person in Leijiverse, and they're part of that ancestry that makes up Toki no Wa, which references the star system.
Because of his style. That's how Leiji draws his characters, his women, his men. You know, sometimes you can't break the habit of drawing the same character.
Well, all anime kind of has this. Even if there's a meme where if you take all the Dragon Ball characters and you just swap their hair, they all look the same. So maybe look up that GIF. So I think we're good to really crack into this story here and at least get through the first song, which we didn't say was the first song is One More Time. You know. Anyways, so they are performing. Their planetary defenses are a bit distracted, a bit slack-jawed. This is probably a reference to Space Pirate Captain Harlock, where the Earth defenses are generally incompetent. They all fear him. And these shadowy figures, they abduct the group. They end up disabling a central computer and basically turning everything off, gassing everybody. Everybody goes to sleep. Another interesting thing, this central computer really looks like... in Yamato, it's the Cosmo Reverse, and that's what they use kind of as a plot device there. And in Captain Harlock, it's kind of like the spaceship Arcadia's central computer. So that's a motif of a central computer that he uses quite a bit. It's kind of the most music video of the lot, but ironically, it's not the best music video of the lot.
They were putting it out with like the lead single for the album, like in the real world, as like a music video to stand on its own. So I think that's kind of why it comes off a little more music video-y than the rest of the movie.
I don't have a ton of notes on aerodynamic, which comes up next, where basically we're seeing that abduction continue by the unknown task force, and they are placed into these pods, the pods really resembling in Space Battleship Yamato. Hey there, quick correction. Actually, I was thinking of the Space Battleship Yamato 2199 reboot, where you do see Sasha in that capsule, but more prominently before this, Queen Melania features this kind of capsule coffin design. We do get the back shadowy silhouette of a spiky-haired antagonist who's got this long kind of broom sweeping, literally, hair. This is Earl de Darkwood, I believe is his name, and he commands from a tubular control room, which really represents the control room of the 39 in Galaxy Express 39, the train's central computing unit. So moving right along, this song I think is really well loved. We see Shep for the first time, and Shep is kind of buffing with I don't know what those things are called. I think they're just called a buffer, the outside of a ship, and he's dancing to it, this sort of janitorial dance. I don't know what, that's kind of an archetype in itself, the dancing janitor. I don't know where that really comes from. He comes into the ship, he's got a high collar on, so he's more of like, the first guy we saw is a bit like a hero that we see as the Leijiverse. We're like, oh, this guy Arpegius, he must be the hero. Well, then we see Shep and we're like, oh, maybe he's the hero, actually. Our hero. Yeah, and it kind of makes Arpegius redundant in a lot of ways, but it is necessary for the story to end that we'll see. His ship appears as a flying V guitar. Now, Wub, I don't know how comfortable you are with the concept of sexual subtext in storytelling, but it is rampant in Leiji Matsumoto's work. If you see in that interview, he says, I'm interested in romance. And as far as the classic mangaka go, classic Japanese comic book artist, he and maybe Go Nagai, as far as like classic masters, maybe they could compete on levels of erotic work that they have, with very sexy women on the cover, basically not wearing any clothes. And he wants to tell, now Go Nagai's storytelling is a little more rambunctious, we'll put it that way. And Matsumoto's eroticism has a lot of shadows and, you know, feet sticking out of the covers and sort of things like that. So
a little bit more class.
Yes, a little classier there. But the flying V guitar, especially when we see those boosters come on, maybe a little phallic. That's all I got to say about it.
there's this part when he's going through the portal, maybe spoiling a bit or whatever, but he's going through the portal and he's holding onto the stick for dear life, and he's just like this, and the control stick is sticking out. It looks like a penis.
Yeah. Before he does that, he goes into his room, and we see his spank bank a little bit, actually. He's got his spank bank all over the walls. In fact, he's got Stella right on the roof over his bed. I wonder what's going on there a few nights a week, because we get him with his first dream sequence, and maybe these aliens are able to have these kind of psychic tandem dreams, and it seems like they experience their dreams more vividly, which might be a comment on Matsumoto, maybe something ideally he would prefer humans do, to live their dreams more vividly. He is a big proponent of dreams and following your dreams more specifically. He goes through this dream sequence with Stella from the band, who's just been abducted. He doesn't know that yet, though. And they have sort of a fantasy romance there.
Well, we just find out that, Shep is a huge Stella stan. He's a fanboy, and that he has a dream with her flying. And the animation of this is so reminiscent of a movie called Macross Do You Remember Love, where Hikaru and Minmay are trapped in the anti-gravity section of the Macross, and they have like a little date, and Minmay flies at zero gravity the same way Stella does, and you see Stella flying through the air, and Shemp coming after her, concerned, trying to keep up with her. That's exactly what happens in Macross Do You Remember Love. I don't know if that was an accident. I got really Do You Remember Love vibes from that scene.
I don't believe in accidents in the Leijiverse at this point. So I'm saying I think you're on point. But his dream is interrupted. He gets an emergency call, and that reveals his position as sort of a special forces for this alien race. So first we might have thought, this guy's a janitor. Maybe what's he doing out here in this flying vegan? Oh, he's actually special forces, and he gets on that call, and he's tracking the ship of Earl de Darkwood. I didn't mention he invaded on a ship. My bad. The ship leaves, and it generates an interdimensional portal, which is a spiraling, circling diamond.
It's from Superman. The Phantom Zone. It looked like the Phantom Zone from Superman. From Superman and Superman 2.
We've got these sort of sexy shapes intersecting here. When a spaceship, when a guitar spaceship and an interdimensional portal love each other very much, they enter Stella. Maybe that's, have you ever thought of that? Anyways, don't think about it too hard. And we'll continue.
I actually never thought about that.
They go through this interdimensional portal, which is a bit of a Yamato reference, or going through interdimensional space. And the abducting ship returns to Earth. It kind of warps into a 747, I think you said, vintage. And we're done with that song.
It's my favorite part of the film. The music and the animation go together so well.
This section right here is very well animated. It's very dreamlike, not only because he's dreaming, but it is very dreamlike, and it's very, very well paced. It gets to the point. The song is amazing. It's a very solid section of the film.
Yeah, and we were talking about that dreamlike quality. A production note is that I think this is how it's properly rendered, is that the frames blend, and it has this fuzzy quality to the whole thing that comes of that. It smooths out the animation to a degree, because there's transparency between the frames and you kind of see a blending, but it also creates a haze. And so this whole, again, we're talking about dreams, right? Even in the production, it has this dreamy quality to it.
One good thing about the animation in this one that I really love is when they are about to kiss, and it's incredible because it's not in the soundtrack. It's the alarm, and he notices it, but she doesn't. She's the dream, and he's going back to reality. And when it cuts to him, he's like, he has a hug. He's like hugging her, but he's like, oh, what's going on? That is so great that they included that to make us identify with him, and because that's very simple to overlook with animation. Just like, oh, he has a dream, and then he comes out of it. But they gave him so much personality and so so much to identify with him.
Yeah.
That's so great.
A lot of strong, classic visual storytelling elements in there. And Matsumoto, he never thought himself much of an animator, not much of an animation guy, really. He let a lot of other people do the more technical things, unlike Tezuka. But he has such a keen eye for visual storytelling that I think he adds that to this. Probably the most successful segment, in my opinion, visually merging that with the animation. Maybe you guys prefer Digital Love, but I think overall, harder, better, faster, stronger. I'm going to pronounce it right. The band is getting assimilated now, and we see them going through these pods, and their clothes are being ripped off of them, and they're receiving these blobs of body paint. 3 of them becoming white, 1 of them becoming African, as we said, dark skin, and the band is assimilated, and the abductor's face is revealed, who assumes the role of the band's manager on Earth. I'm not going to describe every part of that. I will say there are a few little Easter eggs there. I would say this is the most iconic segment, and you get a lot of cool references. Beryl, when they're getting outfits and they're getting the little previews of the outfits on screen. One of Beryl's options is a skull shirt. That skull is the Arcadia skull, and it is a very similar shirt, a black skull shirt as Totoro wears in Endless Orbit SSX, which is my favorite Harlock anime. And Stella gets a schoolgirl outfit. I didn't get the time to go around to this, but Matsumoto's drawn a couple schoolgirls in his day, I'll say. You know, I think most mangaka have,
be an
but
anime without it.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of a classic anime reference there, but he has done some specific schoolgirl manga looking stuff.
I'd say probably second to Digital Love. It's also another really good section. I mean, the song obviously has a huge cultural impact because Kanye West sampled it, and it kind of brought it over to like the American like hip hop scene and whatnot, more pop culture than it already was. There are some parallels, I'll say, in the music video for Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, in the music video for Stronger.
It's a homage to a 1988 film called Akira. I've heard people have said, oh, this music video, it's like an homage to that. Yeah,
but I'm watching this music video by Kanye West and I'm thinking, oh, this kind of reminds me of the Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger music video, because they're both like these human, like, and these sitting in this machine thing.
Daft Punk chose Leiji Matsumoto, and Kanye chose Katsuhiro Otomo. You know, the Akira film is such an iconic anime film. It's been homaged to death. It's been animated by Batman, the animated series, Star Wars, Clone Wars, everything. Everyone has done the Kaneda bike slide. It's ridiculous.
and to talk about story themes a little bit more there too, I mean, there is a dehumanization that goes on in Akira. Very literally, somebody is kind of taken apart and not put back together in a different order because they're trying to eliminate that. Yeah,
I mean, Kanye has been experimented on, and he wants, to take, he's permanently deformed, and now he wants to take it out on the record industry. And that. Are
you talking about real life or the music video?
I'm talking about both. Tetsuo, character from Akira, Tetsuo, has been experimented upon, and he has this power now, and he's just a 15-year-old kid. And what do 15-year-old kids do? They fuck up and they try their powers, and their powers get the best of them, and they destroy us.
More existential than the message of Galaxy Express 39, which is a bit more romantic and forgiving, ultimately.
Oh, yeah. Katsuhiro Otomo is the later generation of Leiji Matsumoto. Leiji Matsumoto is all about romance, and the other guy is more about urbanization and, very nihilistic stuff.
I call it it's a lot of existentialism going on in 80s anime, but I'm not going to dive into that because we have romance, and we have what is actually my favorite song on the record. Are we good with Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger? Are we good to move on?
One more thing about Harder, Faster, Stronger. Their underwear is indestructible.
It's true. It's true. What a fantastic...
Except the underwear.
Yeah.
Those underwear is amazing.
Missed opportunity. Beryl is wearing traditional boxers, which is somewhat like the Matsumoto reference, but I wish he had the blue stripes on his boxers like Atako Oiden, which is Matsumoto's breakthrough manga that really brought him to popularity in Japan. But no such underwear there. And we're moving on to my favorite song on the record, Crescendos. Here we're seeing a music executive. He's being pitched this new band called the Crescendos by that managing Earl figure, the antagonist. And they record an album. It should be noted here, something I didn't note about Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger is we see this band who throughout the first song, One More Time, they're ecstatic. They've got huge smiles on their faces. And then after this humanization process, human after all, maybe, different album, we see them very, very depressed, very out of it. Their memories have been kind of taken from them and put on magnetic tape. I didn't note that, which is a fun thing, but they've had their souls kind of captured from them, and now they're a bit soulless, and they're in the music industry, and it's a bit soulless, and they're recording this wonderful music, and the executive's excited. Now, the executive, a bit of a rube here. He doesn't know so much what's going on, but these guys are feeling pretty bad right now, but they're making beautiful music, and they start to take off. You see them start to take off through this song as well, and they get their popularity.
I have a lot of questions about this movie that I do kind of explain away through a theory I have. But one question I have between the Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and I call it Crescendos. They're erasing the memory and they're like implanting a new memory or whatever. And they're also like at the same time scanning them as humans and pasting that over when they were aliens. How did Earl the Darkwood get footage of their performance as aliens? How? Like, how did that happen?
It's AI. It's generative AI.
So, I mean, like, I have these questions, like, how did that happen? How did this happen? And at the end, I'm sure I'll kind of explain why I think weird things happen in this movie. But
here's a distinction we make in the Leijiverse. You have your sci-fi. That's your science fiction. And then you have your sci-fantasy. And you got your sci-fi's, got your Star Trek, and your sci-fantasies got your Star Wars, okay? This is a difference. And what we're looking at in these little metaphors, these little adapted ideas, why would this, they've got generative AI, they've got this insane technology, why are they putting the memory on magnetic tape? So it's a metaphor. Why is the Galaxy Express 39 a train? Why is the Space Battleship Yamato a warship? It's Matsumoto's fetish. He has fetishes. We know what they are. It's military equipment, it's technology, and it's these women. And he likes to draw them, and he's going to put them in every cool situation that he can think of. And it's basically, that's the childish part, I think, of Matsumoto's work, is that sort of free association and fun visual metaphor. That's why a lot of us are showing up.
Still doesn't explain why he has the video.
Sci-fantasy. Night vision, we get this, it's a very moody piano intro, and we're getting a bit of a noir vibe here as we see a mysterious cloaked figure walking through the alleyways of a rainy cityscape. It's very LA, this place that they're in. This shadowy figure's kind of chased through some alleys. He's having a problem, but then we cut to the band and their malaise is at an all-time high. They're signing these photos of themselves and they're exhausted. I mean, this is the thing that it's literally killing them to continue to write this. Barrel's dozing off and Stella is looking out into the distance. One thing I didn't note about Stella in Crescendos, I think I remember now, she ends up meeting a fan through this meteoric rise they have, and she shakes their hand and then she just looks at her hand like she's gonna just vomit right there. And I was just like, it's not just disgust, but it's like weary, hopeless disgust. And they probably can read emotions too, just confused disgust. And she's looking out onto the cityscape of LA, and we got back to this cloaked figure, and he's infiltrating the town, and it's revealed to be Shep that we see there, and he's on a mission. He's gonna save the day. We didn't note originally that his Flying V crashes on Earth behind Earl. It's an interlude, I think, more so than anything, but it's establishing and setting us up for the next thing. Wub, any thoughts?
I just wanted, going back to Crescendos. Yeah, when Stella shakes that fan's hand and she just kind of looks at her hand, I don't know, I've always kind of interpreted it as like beneath the human paint and whatever, she's an alien. To her, the humans are aliens, right? And she is brainwashed or whatever, but she just like shook this alien's hand, and maybe like some remnant of her actual self is realizing like this is so crazy, you know?
Yeah, something feels off.
Vintage, I think you even said Stella may never have shook a hand before. We don't know if they have handshakes where they come from.
They don't know.
Oh, yeah, maybe they don't do that.
They're baffled by our culture. You know, when we first meet the band in their home planet, everyone is like dancing and having a good time. But in our world, we treat the musician like an object or something that we own or something that we purchase or something.
And the hand motif comes up again then as she looks out there, because at first she puts her hand on it like this on the mirror, but then she flips it over to touch it like that, and then we zoom out. So the hand motif comes back, and I think you're onto something there. Something is clicking with Stella. Stella is becoming a bit more aware of her own. She's awakening on her own, slowly but surely, and she seems to have even more strength than the other guys at that point, who are nodding off, but she's just thinking something's lighting up there. So it is a little bit of interesting. A lot is set up in this little interlude. Superheroes. The Crescendos are performing an epic orchestral concert in a stadium. Cloak Shep, he does this epic dive. He's got these sort of wings on it first, and they detach, and he's sort of going down. He's like a high diving, or I forget your parachute operator, sort of, and that could be sort of a Matsumoto thing. He's got a lot of war references in there, like I've said.
It is so random how he flies to the audience, and there's 2 jet propel things on his belt. And that is just like how Kashern, was it 1973 anime? Not animated by Toei, but animated by Tatsunoko, one of Toei's competitors. But he flies like Kashern, the robot hunter. And it's so weird because I'm like, wait, that's Kashern.
He kind of flies in, and he's got this sort of Men in Black device. I don't remember when Men in Black was released. I think it's like 90 in the late 90s or something. 96, got it.
I think.
He's able to restore everybody's memories but Earl hops in the way of Stella and prevents that from happening. And so we had the male band members and Shep escape, and they hop in a van, and it's full of music equipment. And I've done this before. They're essentially on tour now. So the band has gone on tour for their first independent tour, so congrats to them. And the henchmen are quick on their tail, though, and they're trailing the band, and they get into this sort of a shootout, and there is a shot taken by Shep, but at the second, and the guns of these henchmen kind of look like the hilts of gravity sabers that are held by Emeraldus and Captain Harlock, and maybe Maytel uses one at a point, I can't remember. But they're shooting them, and they get hit by a truck, these henchmen, and it's an epic explosion, and we get sort of P800-ish vibe going on when we see that these henchmen are actually somewhat robotic, so we could probably assume that about all of Earl's henchmen, that these are all sort of robotic automatons that are acting out his will.
I think this section is kind of funny because when you just listen to Discovery on its own, and there's just all of a sudden these laser noises happening, you're probably thinking, what the heck is this sound? Like, why is there random like lasers, like pew pew? But then you watch the movie and you're like, oh, it kind of makes sense in context now.
Yeah.
But for like 2 years, people listening to the album are probably just like, why is there lasers here? But I'm pretty sure when they were making the album, they had this in mind. They were making the album and writing like narratives for first their live action film and then later on the anime, like they were coinciding.
When Daft Punk was coming along in their early works, when does this classical music start to come up? Do you know when they're integrating that?
On Homework, their first album, it was just all dance stuff, you know. There wasn't really any classical stuff until Discovery. Daft Punk have always just been influenced by everything. And Thomas grew up, his mom was a ballet dancer, and he also just last year / this year put out an orchestral album as a solo artist. So I think there's always been some DNA.
It may not be odd, though. I might have to interject there because, again, all these things seem very deliberate here, and it just seems, like I was saying, Matsumoto brings the classical opera vibe into space opera. those motifs, those songs, the classical music, I mean, the Yamato OST, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's, you know, all this marching sort of classic vibe and style to it. So to me, you know, when I hear, you know, coming out of Daft Punk, it makes perfect sense with Matsumoto, and it's lining up and the themes are lining up and all these disparate elements that you thought wouldn't go together. Well, Matsumoto put them together 30 years earlier, so it's not going to be a problem for Daft Punk now.
Yeah, I'm sure they were influenced by that. I mean, they were watching his stuff, you know?
Yeah.
One thing about superheroes that always amused me, Stella does this really, it looks good in animation, but it's pretty dangerous on stage. She whips her guitar cord.
Yeah, Arpegius, I got to describe it because I've been on a stage and Arpegius is standing there, he's playing guitar, and then Stella, she's got a wired bass, which she doesn't need a wired bass, and she's just dances right in front of him with the wire, and I'm just looking at that like, if I was the guitarist, I'd be like, seriously? You needed to do that? You needed to, I can get a trip on that now. Anyways, silly commentary.
Seriously.
They do the same moves that they do when they were aliens. So do they remember the moves that they were doing?
I think that's probably the part of it is the memory preservation and transposition is that they do have that.
They're now corporatists. They stray from their roots, and I think they're just like doing it like half-assed or zombie, but they're still producing good music under, you know, being hypnosed. It's kind of a commentary about corporate music. Yeah, something
it's like a mirrored version of the first song. Right. And they've got similar sort of epic vibes to them, too. So it's, you know, even musically, the themes are there. I don't know if you could see more malaise in superheroes than one. I think you could. Probably because One More Time is like, and one, it's got that backbeat to it that is very oppressive. So very interesting to point that out. I think we're good to continue, though, onto High Life, where we see Earl is starting to set up Stella with her. It seems like he's pruning her for a solo career, right? And this is where we see Gwen Stefani quit No Doubt and begin her own solo career to a degree, if we're looking for the music industry references. They go to this awards ceremony, and she prepares for it in this dress, and Earl kind of drops this business card, and it's got Darkwood Manor on it, you know, be there 5:55 on 5:05 a.m. or something. Something's going to go on at this business card. I don't know how it just drops out. It's kind of a weird plot device, but we gotta make sure things happen later on, and we have the 4/5 motif there. Stella goes to this award ceremony in this new dress at the Crescendos, and an interesting motif we see here, these dragon statues outside, and those seem a little bit odd. Vintage even pointed those out to me, and I found that surprising because he didn't have as much of this symbology in his head to think about. They win their award. They win over Daft Punk, who gets their cameo, kind of like Leiji Matsumoto would get his cameo in all of his things. They win also over the band called Blackbird, which seems to be a reference to the Beatles. But Beryl, we see him infiltrate. We see a bunch of photographers at first during this award show, but then we see this signature wide brim hat. It's got studs on his, so it's a little bit more LA version of the wide brim hat, a little less Wild West, and he's wearing a bit of a cloak with a high collar, and it turns out, yes, this is Beryl, and Beryl now has the Men in Black little memory gun there, and he hits Stella with it, and she is awakened. She's beginning to awaken. We kind of realize this is the first step. They're not really sure who they are yet, but it's their first step. He basically motions, hey, let's get out of here, and she bounces. Earl is busy in his own vanity, right? He's accepting the award as the manager. He's a very vain man, so that's his downfall. And the band basically recaptures her. The only thing I have to say here is that the music industry is being torn to shreds in this movie.
Yes. Yeah, the entire movie is really a commentary on the music industry. Even, you know, kind of these soulless drones can be like successful because there's just this huge machine kind of pumping them out to the world.
Stella looks like she's miserable and frankly, in subtle ways, it looks like Darkwood has been grooming her. I don't know, but it's just very, very uncomfortable. The music industry is infamous for their sexual tendencies towards, their artists, and being in these slave contracts and being in these very one-sided deals for the artists. And it's
prostitution. We could obviously, she's wearing sort of a Pretty Woman outfit there too. The idea of as the artist as a prostitute, this is an idea in Matsumoto's own manga. He's got a manga called
Die for and Den.
And this Totoro looking character actually prostitutes himself all over town to care for his
little sister,
who looks a bit like Mayu in Space Pirate Captain Harlock. So you can obviously look at that manga that Matsumoto did as an expression of his feeling of being, one of the hottest guys. The 70s were his year in Japan. So if you were thinking about, Sid and Marty Krofft or Hanna-Barbera in America, Leiji Matsumoto took that spot in the 70s. I think he did a lot better job with it. He was probably feeling, he was working for Toei, and Space Battleship Yamato was owned by something else. And then he had his manga publisher. He's working for 3 different entities right there. And he's trying to maintain his independence and creative control through all of it. And he's got to be feeling used and taken advantage of. So I think that prostitution motif, spot on. It is there.
Something funny I noticed is when he gets the Golden Record Award and he's looking at it, you can see the text on it, and they misspell like 2 words. They misspelled guitar. Instead of an A, they had an E.
Yep.
And I forget which other one they misspelled, but they misspelled a couple things. The process was a bit difficult because we have Daft Punk, who are French. They do also speak English, but they're in Japan. They needed to get a translator to translate from either French or English, whichever one they were using, and translate that into Japanese.
I think that he speaks French more accurately than English. So as far as communicating with Daft Punk, I don't know if he speaks French, but I think he may understand it fairly well. I've at least seen him interview with French people, and it seemed fairly fluid. He was speaking Japanese, but I don't think he's comfortable in it. He might have been actually instrumental in the translation process. It might have made things a little easier to have Matsumoto on board working with a French band because of his connections to France.
I just have another, one of those weird, why is this happening? There were like thousands of people at the show in Superheroes, and they see this dude fly over them with these rocket things, and he's blue, and he's on stage, and he's like, bam, 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 and then they all run off. And then to the public, they don't see those members ever again, and they're like, what are they thinking? What is the general public thinking? What happened? And then all of a sudden, there's an award ceremony, and it's only Stella there. What is everyone thinking about this situation, There's no one questioning. After Stella gets out of there, what is Earl thinking? We don't see Earl again until later, and it seems like he doesn't care what happened.
There's like a missed opportunity there for a TMZ segment, right? Like, what happened at that concert last night? That was crazy. Kanye, what do you think? It's like, be a crazy media cycle, right? So we don't get to see that so much in there, but you could assume maybe that happened. And then as far as Earl goes, I don't know, maybe his henchmen lied and said, oh yeah, we killed him. Who knows? So again, there are plot holes here for sure.
Or they're on extended vacation, they're on drug rehab or something.
Yes. So I think we are going to move from High Life to Something About Us, and I think this one's for the ladies, like Digital Love is too. Maybe not the video, but Something About Us is a real heart ripper of a song as itself. And then we get into this. We see Stella being brought back to this hideout that they've got, and we see that Shep, he took that shot in the chase, and it isn't going so well. He's on sort of a broken mattress, and the band, who are still a bit in a haze, we realize they're not really fully aware of their situation yet. They see this, but they recognize death. They recognize somebody dying. Shep's like, no, this isn't going well. But he musters the energy, pulls up his arm, and offers his hand to Stella. And that dream sequence that we originally saw is now brought to life, and we see that maybe that dream sequence wasn't just a daydream, but a psychic manifestation that this alien race is able to conjure conjure and experience this kind of joy in a dream world, like a holodeck in their own heads. It's a psychic tandem between him and Stella, who he reaches out his hand to and she takes it, maybe recognizing that he's been the hero in this situation now. And they are taking on another dream sequence. It finally comes to an end, and they're presented with this little bit of toy merch, this pyramid shape with a glowing light in it. It has a hologram, and it shows them in this little chibi form, and this finally clicks with them, and they recognize who they are, and Shep has shown them who they are, and he's fulfilled his task as the special forces of their planet. He's done his job. He's fulfilled his dreams, because time will not betray dreams. This is one of the biggest themes of the Leijiverse, and something that Matsumoto has said himself is that death is not going to stop you from achieving your dreams. There's something that you need to do in this life, and if you've done what you need to do in this life, the dreams will come to fruition.
That's really interesting what you say about kind of death and achieving your dreams and all that, because I mean, yeah, ultimately Shep, he achieves his dream, which I guess is meeting Stella, having a connection with Stella.
Yeah, he's a fan.
So, like, good for him. I'm sure I'm sure, everyone kind of empathizes with, maybe you have a crush on someone and we see our boy like succeed, but right before he dies, so R.I.P., but like he went out on a high note type beat, So good for him. I mean, yeah, in general, I just love the song and the vibe. I mean, obviously it's kind of, the music video is sad, and the content of the song is actually kind of sad. It's more of like a unrequited love song.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of like an incel song.
It maybe don't call me out like that. No, I'm kidding. We're gonna drop that whole thing right there. But I'm gonna also say, like, you say that this is a guy who also like flies a really cool spaceship across the universe. So maybe sex isn't a daily part of his life. That's actually something that Harlock can relate to. And the story of Harlock, and Harlock had a lot of variations through time, and one of them being a great Harlock who was disarmed in battle. Let's put it that way. So he's unable to love his wife, and there's somebody he passes the torch to. So this is something like the war hero who can't be with their love and dies in it. And so he's, involuntarily celibate isn't the right word, because celibacy is, if you are celibate, you have voluntarily taken on the duty. It's like a priest would. That's a different topic, but chaste would be involuntarily chaste. But he's chosen his celibacy. He chose to be in the special forces. He chose to be part of the military. He knew what that required. That required isolation, and it kept him away from a lot of his peers, but he defended them from far away. So as you laugh, I understand, but this is actually something that means a lot to Matsumoto and his storytelling. The soldier who fights.
It reminds me of the original Gundam, and the two characters are Amuro Ray and Lala. They're called new types in this canon. They're called new types, new type of person. They read each other's minds, and they fall in love instantly, and then tragedy strikes. So this does remind me of Amuro and Lala's relationship too.
Let's voyage on to Voyager, and the band is escaping this situation. They've come to they don't fully understand themselves. I take that back, but they know a lot more about themselves. So they have purpose, and they've discovered this card that Stella had, and they go to the Darkwood. They need to go to the Darkwood Manor. I think I brought up the manor too soon, because they're actually going to bury Shep first. And they hop back in the van. And this segment here to me is Earth's redemption arc. We just basically see the aliens experiencing the countryside of Earth and appreciating its beauty, and realizing that the place they're in isn't necessarily evil. They've seen a lot of trauma. They've seen a lot of pain. They've experienced a lot of hurt here. This has been a super bad experience for them. But through this journey, they come to realize that the place they're in isn't necessarily a bad place. They find a tree on a hill. This is a reference that is found in Space Pirate Captain Harlock, when we see Totaro's grave is on a hill under a tree, and they bury Shep. The flowers seem to spring up from his grave, and we see him sort of ascending. His soul ascends. He gives kind of a final knowing glance and goes into the ether. They then find, they see this card and they realize, we've got to go do this now. We've got to thwart the evil. We've got to avenge the death of Shep.
Voyager is one of my favorite tracks on the album. I think it really speaks to how well Daft Punk were writing the narrative of the movie and making the music at the same time, because Voyager is one of my favorite tracks to drive to. And in the music video, that's what they're doing. They're just driving through America, you know?
It's a very beautiful segment, the beauty of nature, and really wanted people to respect the environment and not trash it or not industrialize it or pervert it. They wanted to conserve the environment, you know. After World War II, you know, Japan was devastated by the 2 nuclear bombs. Something that people kind of forget is that Japan is you know, we always like see these post-apocalyptic stories, but Japan itself is a post-apocalyptic society.
The nuclear themes of Yamato are evident. It's a scorched red planet like Mars by these kind of nuclear planet bombs, and the radiation is seeping into Earth there. So obviously the nuclear bombs caused a lot of damage in Japan, but not just nuclear bombs. Entire cities were firebombed over and over, and the landscape of Japan, at least the urban landscape of Japan, was torched. So I guess at that point, though, there is a return to nature. There is a return to the countryside, a return to a simpler rural life, and kind of rebuilding, a grassroots rebuilding. And so that appreciation for nature, obviously on display in most Japanese media, and we see it here in Voyager for sure. Big bop, a very classical bop, Veridis Quo, where we get the setting of the manor established here. This van struggling up a snowy drive, spinning out. Reminds me of being in the band van a few times going up a slippery hill. It can get a little hairy sometimes. They get up to this bridge where they have to basically hoof it from there, and they approach the door of the manor, which to me has these dragon teeth in it, and they're about to enter the dragon. And this dragon kind of motif is also referenced in the record award ceremony. You might suspect there, I wonder who is kind of the puppet master of this awards ceremony. Are the awards rigged? Yes, they are. Earl rigged the awards, and he is the mastermind of this whole situation. At least I'm saying that. I am going beyond speculation and saying, yes, this was a rigged gig. It's all to plan, and they're about to go into the dragon's mouth and try to foil that. They force their way in. The band stumbles upon this engraving on the wall that they flash up to, featuring a figure who looks like Earl in this olden garb, and this is alluding to Adieu Galaxy Express 39, where we see Maytels and the shock therein of seeing, you know, how timeless Maytel really is. So that's being echoed here. And upon further discovery, they find a book detailing Earl's history called Veridis Quo, and that means to what purpose? To what ends? Why? The why is here. They have their why finally. Earl's been taking famous alien musicians for a long time, all throughout history, and using them to attain these golden records, which must be imbued with some sort of energy, and he's just kind of casting them away. Earth doesn't seem to have any good musicians. Apparently, they're all kind of bad. I think we do see here the flash to the other past musicians, and we're seeing a lot of alcoholism and drug use and broken guitar, broken people, and they are being used up and basically cast into this volcano that Darkwood Manor sits upon, and this is where the power is being focused here. Vintage, you had an interesting note here about what the band does and their kind of sequence here and what that echoes.
Yeah, it's very Scooby-Doo-ish, and very 70s, like the band, like going to the scary castle and investigate. Yeah, I don't know if it's a direct reference or it's an accent, but very Scooby-Doo-ish.
Well, when you start to think about also Josie and the Pussycats, right, which is another Hanna-Barbera van, so maybe a reference there as well.
Just going back to the prism thing, they get to the gate, and then the prism, it just like magically de-encrypts the door, and the door just disappears. Like it's like imbued with like some kind of secret like military tech, maybe. again, like, is this some kind of thing that like the special forces from like their planet have, because Shep is like some special forces person?
It's the key. It's sort of, and it transposes the light, and it sheds light. Maybe it is sort of that light through prism maybe motif being used there.
Yeah. When they're looking through the book and they're like reading the past of Earl, it's never made any sense to me. I don't know what is going on. Somehow he is like hundreds of years old and figured out how to like travel space, and somehow this golden record is going to imbue him the power of like conquering the universe. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Ever seen The Fifth Element, the big ball of evil that's just in the center of the universe that wants to do bad things, and it's just it's not explained. It's not like rational, but it's just like the thing. That's what strikes me as what Daft Punk is doing. It's doing this ultimate evil like thing that it's not like complicated, but I think in a project like this, where there's no dialogue, there's only music, and it's an hour long, I think you need a simplistic bad guy to carry the movie onward.
Okay. I get that.
Yeah, and if we're going to demonize or even make a character out of what is really just a series of humans trying to make a system, right? In the fantasy world, it's not as helpful to assign something to incompetence than malice. In the fantasy world, we attribute things to malice because we need antagonists. And so Earl is a literal existential threat. And how do you imbue that in sci-fantasy? You kind of do it this way.
The main bad guy is just a placeholder for me, for my meaning of this movie, fame, and what fame comes with. That's my
sure. I mean, Hollywood is constantly described as like the devil, right? It's the devil, and it's the devil. Earl is interdimensional devil, and that's about as far as we'll be able to really figure anything out. But if you want to piece things together in your own mind, we love fan theories around here. So I think we're good to move on here to Short Circuit, and we do want to start cooking here with some gas. So, because we're going to get our Deus Ex Machina, and this is in a ton of Matsumoto stuff. Galaxy Express 39 ends with Deus Ex Machina. Almost every episode of Space Pirate Captain Harlock ends that way. So we're getting more of it here. They're escaping the castle. It's destruction, similar to the time castle in the original Galaxy Express 39. And the band escapes, and the van races back to Record Company, that's what it's called, to find their memory disk. Octave gets his time to shine, and he decides to act as he takes on the janitorial role. So we had the janitor at the beginning, and now Octave's taken on a bit of Shep.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
He's infiltrating, but he's intercepted by some security guards. Thankfully, he doesn't get shot in the face by the security guards, just incapacitated. The executive finds Octave and calls the authorities. The band gets closed in on by the cops. Meanwhile, we see as the time castle is destroyed, the analog for the time castle is destroyed, a demonic red force emerges from the ruins of Darkwood and ascends into space, and we could probably assume who that is. So,
yeah, I will add, I believe it's called Golden Record Company, not just Record Company.
Okay.
So it makes a little more sense.
Face to face. The executive learns about the plight of the band, and somehow he turns it into a PR stunt. The Earth is surprisingly chill about all this, kind of like you mentioned before. They were all kind of really chill about this. Maybe they really don't care about these people. They just like the music. But they learn the Darkwood and the history of music itself is exposed to everybody. Everybody learns about what has been happening to all their favorite music. The UN is buying into this. We'll see why they buy into it. There's obviously a motivation for it later, but they figure out how they're going to send them back through an interdimensional rift. The Earth children dress in blue face, maybe a little insensitive. I don't know how it works in this world, so we're going to say it's cool to be in blue face. And they celebrate
in the real world. we discovered an alien race living on our planet and they were blue, we'd be painting our faces blue. I wouldn't be chill about it, I feel like.
Yeah. We'd be like, oh, well, that's, people say... Yeah, people say that about hate amongst humans. Like, the thing that's really going to solve that problem is an alien force coming and making us unite. Like, if it's an oppressive alien force, it's like Yamato, and we all get together and live under the earth and fight against it. But if it's like this, we paint our faces blue and party in the street. It's a different vibe. So, this is a weird version of Yamato in a lot of ways, if you think about it. Those Earth children, they're going to celebrate one more time, but the band is getting their send-off back to Earth. They're put in a spaceship. They pull the Flying V guitar out. They find that, the Flying V guitar spaceship, they pull that out of wreckage, and they put it in these boosters, and they send it on a track, and the track looks a lot like the launching tracks in Galaxy Express 39. This is a very convenient way to wrap things up. Let's move right along to Too Long. Well, we see the band, they enter that interdimensional portal that's created, but all of a sudden, this force that we saw emerge out of Darkwood emerges through this interdimensional tunnel and basically consumes them. And we see that black orb. So maybe a reference, like you said earlier, Vintage. And it's consumed the band in this Too Long spaceship. It's too long. All of a sudden, we have the white, pure light come out. And we realize that death for these aliens isn't so bad because you get to live in the interdimensional space naked and kick Earl's ass around. So Shep comes through at the end of the day. Everybody feels good. They get outside of the interdimensional warp, and they wake up from it, which is kind of like a Yamato reference after their first warp through space and time. Too Long basically turns into a recap episode in a lot of ways. So we're getting that recap episode for anime that's being referenced here. We're seeing flashbacks to the other songs. They decide, hey, I got it. And they just start playing a song. They write a song on the way back to their planet, and they're going to perform that to the planet. They're expected on the planet. So they're just going to launch right from that spaceship into on stage. It's a really cool, we call it like maybe a Showa sequence where they're part of a Sentai team and they're having their cool poses as they spiral down onto that stage. So that's sort of a reference to old anime there as well. They have an amazing party there. Earth gets the broadcast through an interdimensional satellite. So the UN's getting some kickback on this. We didn't send them back for free, people. Yes. We have interdimensional cable 20 years before Rick and Morty's on the air. So that's pretty cool. We see them after their performance. We see a statue of Shep. We get the honored hero like at
the beginning of Farewell, Space Battleship Yamato.
Captain Okita has passed, and they are honoring him, and they give them the Yamato salute. So that salute they give them is directly from Yamato. The camera zooms out into the blackness of space, and that blackness becomes a vinyl record. It was all a bit of a dream, maybe something like Saint Elsewhere, right? And this child is put to bed, and they're a big fan of Daft Punk and Interstella 4/5. I think it's a great wrap up. I think I've spoken my piece again.
I'll just jump straight to the ending. My interpretation of it has always been like, oh, this kid was just listening to Daft Punk's album Discovery, and this is all just a dream that he had. He was imagining all of these images in his head while he was listening to the album and playing with his toys. But I found out some people, they think what happens in the movie actually happens, and this kid lives in that universe, which I don't agree with. Because the kid is literally listening to Discovery, the album, which has One More Time on it. How is that going to happen if the Crescendo is made one more time? You know?
Yeah.
So I don't buy that theory.
I think you're right.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So the rest of your fandom is wrong. You can tell them that the Leijiverse fans say that they're wrong.
I think it's very few people that think that way, but I have heard those people. And I'm like, I think it's just a dream, my guy. Yeah.
You know what? A good disagreement in the fandom is never a bad thing. As long as people are talking about it, the fandom gets to continue. So have them have whatever theories they like. Bring them to the table, in my opinion.
But yeah, I think that's ultimately why a lot of the plot holes are there. And at the end, you're like, oh, a kid would think of it like that. A kid would just kind of make stuff up and not really make too much sense, you know.
Very childlike, yeah.
every time I watch this movie, I get to the end, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. It was all just a dream.
Almost like you were having one, yeah.
The icing on the cake is the 2 action figures of Shemp and Stella being tucked in with the little boy, and they're finally together. It might not have been real, but it was real to the kid, and that was a really good ending. Very, very, very wholesome.
All of these anime connections and stuff are happening in this movie because this kid loves anime. This kid watches Leiji Matsumoto, and so he's imagining this story in his head, and there's all these anime references.
Could be Leiji Matsumoto himself, maybe, or the director, or the dreamer or something. Yeah, go ahead, Captain.
No, maybe those toys that he has of the Interstellar aliens, maybe those are from something else, and he's put them into this fantasy world. Those are the toys that he plays with, because we've all done that, right? We had the action figures, and we put them in our own stories and scenarios, and we've synced it up to this. And many mangaka, definitely Tezuka and definitely Leiji Matsumoto, would listen to classical music as children and create stories. They were drawing manga as little kids, so you could easily see, like you said, vintage, maybe this is Matsumoto as a child, right? It's the modern version.
It's very fascinating that they wanted to make a live action movie first, but then a little light bulb comes up, let's do an animation. Let's have a little bit more imagination with this.
Well, we don't really know if they thought it was too expensive.
Well, I mean,
right.
One way or another, they went from live action to animation.
Yeah, but animation is way cheaper than live action, and you could do a lot more with animation, and you can have more imagination.
I don't know if it's cheaper, but I will say you can definitely do whatever you want. And yeah, if they're bound by physical thing and they want to represent certain visuals and they can't do it live action, it may be easier in a sense with anime. So yeah. Love this. A complete epic, easily described as an epic. The space rock opera, it brings Daft Punk to international consciousness. This is a huge breakthrough, and it revitalizes Matsumoto's career. It really gives him the wind in his sails to be creative for the next 2 years. He does such a fantastic job with it, and I'm so grateful to Daft Punk for what they did for Matsumoto. I'm sure Daft Punk is extremely grateful that they got to work with one of their heroes from childhood, and that project is what brought them to global consciousness. Those are really my final thoughts. Vintage, why don't you give us your final thoughts here and summarize how you feel about Interstella 4.5?
It's probably a one-of-kind experience that probably won't get a lot of this very often. This is very special. It should be preserved and talked about a little bit more, but it's a fantastic film. It's really, really cool. I think it's a very, very cool time and place where anime and pop music came together, and the band was in the right place with the right time. And go seek this out. If you're hearing this and you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing, get it. It's out there. It's on YouTube. It's on Blu-ray. It's on DVD. Get it. Watch it. Experience it. It's
very great. Special. It is maybe a little bit sad that we might not. I want it done. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care if it's because it's early digital and it's hard to upscale or this or that. We need a re-release. We need to celebrate one more time.
Yes.
Wub, your final thoughts.
It is very unfortunate. It was only ever released in standard definition, and then they did put it on Blu-ray. But by all accounts, the DVD version looks better. So don't bother with the Blu-ray, to be honest. How do you even say the title of this film? You two are saying Interstella 4.5. And to my understanding, Galaxy Express 999 is pronounced Galaxy Express 39. And so to anime people, they look at the title of this and they're like, oh, Leiji Matsumoto's involved. It must be pronounced Interstella 4.5. But to Daft Punk fans, we're clueless to that. And a lot of us just say Interstella 5555. And it's a whole weird thing. How do you say it? The ultimate, saving grace, I guess. There was an interview that Daft Punk was doing. And this journalist, he was like, okay, moving on. We're going to talk about your movie, Interstella 555555, jokingly, because there's so many fives. How do you say it? And then he was like, well, how do you actually say it? Interstella 5555? And Thomas basically says, you can say it however you want. No need to argue about it. You can say it however you want, according to Daft Punk.
You heard the man.
Yeah.
I agree. So, anime fans, chill the fuck out, okay? It's whatever it needs to be. Because the musician was chill about it, and I know that anime is not always the chillest thing. Is that your final thought? Really? Here on what do you?
I mean, I love this movie. I mean, like, look, I got the tattoo. You know, I love it. I love this movie. I got the phone case. You know,
Wow.
It's great. I'd highly recommend watching it. You can watch it for free on YouTube. You can buy the DVD. There's, you know, it's great.
Yeah, there's no excuse. So go out.
The 4K, please.
Yeah. Upscale it. We need a fan upscaling too. We need some AI experts on it or something because we want to see this thing.
I know someone has done that. They've upscaled it.
Oh, wow.
And it looks pretty good, but it's really hard to get out there, like to put on YouTube. It can get taken down, to host it places. But it does exist.
Vintage. Thank you again for being on the panel for the first time. I really appreciate you. Would you like to, plug anything? Let the people know about what you do?
If you want to hang out or whatever, contact me on twitter.com at VintageWeeb8. At VintageWeeb8. But I'm the Vintage Weeb. My letterbox and my Discord is right there.
Awesome Discord.
I hope I was a good guest.
You were a wonderful guest, Vintage. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to having you back on in the near future.
Webb is he's awesome. You're so cool, guy. Daft Punk historian. You're so
Thank you.
No problem.
Wub, you killed it. You did a fantastic job. I learned things. Everybody learned today. So thank you again. Please give us the proper plugs and where people can find you and enjoy you.
The main platform that I'm on is Twitter. You can find me at Daft_Wub. I post pretty much daily. I try and post stuff that is interesting to people about Daft Punk, old and new fans alike. You'll probably learn something by following my Twitter account. And also my website, thedaftpunkhistorian.weebly.com. It's in the bio of my Twitter. It might be easier to find that way. But yeah, there you can find databases of Daft Punk interviews, just a list of every gig they've ever done, just links to every photo shoot they've ever done, stuff like that. If you're interested in learning about Daft Punk, if you're an old fan, if you're a new fan, I'm sure you can learn something on my website, and it's all free. So.
Yeah, his website is kind of like, if you know our Starblazers, again, the Yamato reference here. It's like our Starblazers, but for Daft Punk. So if you're looking for the repository of information, that's where you're going to go to find out about Daft Punk. And I will say, it's funny, you don't watch anime, but you've got the word weeb right in your URL. So that you're going to have to change that. You're going to have to get back to me when you finally get around to watching Galaxy Express 39. And report back to what you thought about it. All right.
Honestly, I think I might have to, because you guys are mentioning all these these connections to robots and humans, and I feel like it might have been a big influence on Daft Punk becoming robots. So I might have to go watch it.
There might be an article on your site in the near future about Leiji Matsumoto. Maybe you'll go a little bit deeper and have more to say about the matter. I'd love to read your thoughts on the master's work. So we'll see. Stay tuned, right? I'm Captain Hardluck, the Leijiverse fan project. You can find us on Facebook.com/Leijiverse. You can find us on Twitter.com/Leijiverse USA. And of course, we're on YouTube right here. So follow, subscribe, and smash that thumbs up button, because we need to spread the word of the Leijiverse, and we need to keep the memory of Daft Punk alive now too. Both of these both of these entities are now sort of up in smoke. So we're left to manage the pieces and observe the legacy and preserve the legacy. So again, thank you, Wub, for doing that work. And thank you, Vintage, for helping me preserve the memory of Leiji Matsumoto. That's all for me. We always ask for a Harlock salute, but you know what? I'm going to ask you for a Yamato salute, since that's the ending of Interstella 5555, however you want to say it. Thank you.
This is the Daft Punk salute.
Okay, yes, I'll give you the Daft Punk salute then. And that's the Prism, maybe.
It's a reference to their live tour. But yeah, that's the Daft Punk salute.
Okay, awesome. Well,
nice.
Peace out, Leijiverse. Peace out, Leijiverse. Peace out, Leijiverse. Have a good one. Say goodbye,
Catch you on the
vintage.
flip side. Goodbye, vintage.